Socrates wasn't trying to win arguments. He was trying to uncover truth with the people he was with. And that's the same spirit that makes coaching and things like crucial conversations tools that are so powerful in the workplace.
Welcome to It Doesn't Take a Genius.
Ramsey!
Marshall. Well, hey, welcome to episode 299.
299!
Which, of course, means it's actually episode 300 because we had that one double episode back before we knew what we were doing where we called it like episode 11 part 1 and 11 part 2. But that's beside the fact, you know?
Oh, that's before we could count.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
We lack that, the skills of numerology.
That's right.
Yeah.
But we will be celebrating, well, just a little preview. We have a very special episode. Just like there were very special episodes of Mr. Belvedere and many other 80s sitcoms. Next time, talking about 300. So, it's going to be fun.
So you've evoked the name of Socrates.
Yes.
Okay. This
Here
guy
we go.
He was pretty smart. You seemed very, passionate about these old dudes.
I do, yes. and I happen to be in a class. My camera's going everywhere, but I am a tutor for a homeschool group called Classical Conversations. It's a curriculum, a study group. We meet on campus once a week, and I'm tutoring the sophomores this year. And this is one of our textbooks, and it's a couple Socratic dialogues. Plato wrote down his teacher Socrates' writings. I don't know how much of it was, sort of fictionalized or glossed over to make it, these nice, tidy little dialogues. But it's basically a little, kind of one-act play in each dialogue where he's, laying down some truth with somebody who's asking him questions. So this is, my kids have been reading this out loud all year. We've read it through. We're now on our second read through out loud, just sort of, each of us taking a different role, one of the parts, somebody's Socrates, and somebody, in this case, is Meno, the guy who's asking him questions. And in this one, Meno asks, can virtue be taught? That's the question.
Ooh.
And it leads to this long conversation that we won't talk so much about virtue today, but it's a really interesting thing that happens in the dialogue that is something managers need to know about if you're going to manage a workplace. And it's something we've talked about before. We've talked about Dr. Samuel Johnson, who said people need to be reminded more often than they need to be instructed. People need to be reminded more often than they need to be instructed. And
I love that. And how many times do we talk about that in the stores?
Yeah.
When we're talking about organizationally, we always say, we're in the we used to business.
Darn right.
And so we'll be coaching, we'll be facilitating a discussion, and suddenly somebody will go, we used to.
Yeah.
And
right.
then that all comes flooding back that we've solved this once.
One of my favorites.
We have the know-how and skills to do this. We just momentarily forgot it.
Yeah, let's go do it now that we've been reminded, right? and that's one of the things, we are good about asking at the end of a workshop or at the end of a session to say, what was most useful for you? One of the coaching habit questions from Michael Bungay Stanier. And so often you'll have a manager say, it was just a really good reminder, of some things I knew about. Well, I used to get kind of mad at that answer because I would think, okay, so basically you're saying you learned nothing today. There's no insight here for you. Nope, wrong, right? They already had the insight. They got reminded of the insight. Now they go take that and turn it into action, and they actually do something with it. So it's a thing of beauty. So it's a principle we know, and it's something that Socrates was embracing in the early days. And when we say early days, like just to put it in perspective, Socrates trained Plato, educated Plato. Plato educated Aristotle. Aristotle at one point was the tutor to Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great spread Greek culture across the known world. Eventually, the Romans adopt that culture and spread it even farther. That educational system and those values and so on. And so we're talking about something early on. Plato wrote this down. There's a famous quote from a classical educator who said, "All philosophy is a footnote to Plato." So we're talking about stuff that is just early insights on human nature that the Greeks were the first really to put pen to paper on. And this is a big one. You know, what we're talking about that we have seen play out in the workplace, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates were noticing this in the early days of what we now call Western civilization. So there's some truth here that really drives effective leadership, effective coaching, all the way down to a modern car dealership and all of our other clients. I love this stuff.
No, that's fascinating. And as much as I'd like to have deep thoughts, my third grade brain just keeps going to the quote from Vincini, which is, you've heard of Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, morons.
You've said it every time I've brought them up. So
It just can't, it's just wired in my head. I can't stop doing it. I feel somewhat bad and yet highly amused. At myself.
I mean it, and honestly, the way Plato writes Socrates, the dude has a sense of humor.
Right.
Like you read the Republic, and there are whole sections where I'm like, I think he is winking the whole time he says this. Like he's making these big claims that get people's attention, and does things to sort of tease the person who's asking questions of him. And that happens here. I'll give you one of the aspects of the story that just kind of makes it, I guess, at least a little bit funny. But he basically gets to a point with Meno where they're not quite arguing, right? But they're definitely having this back and forth dialogue where he says, well, you want to know if virtue can be taught? Gosh, Meno, I'm not even sure I know what virtue is. What is virtue? And Meno's like, well, like justice or wisdom. And he says, oh, so you're sort of like saying, if I said, what is a bee? And you said, honeybee or bumblebee. Like, yeah, those are all bees, but like, what makes them bees? Give me the universal here. You're giving me particular examples. Give me the universal definition. And eventually, Meno kind of like craps out. He's like, you know what, Socrates? Everybody told me that this is what it's like talking to you. You're like a torpedo fish. You're like a doggone torpedo fish. And what he means is a stingray. It's like, you're a stingray. You torpify people. You just get people where they're all numb and shocked, and I don't even know what to say. And Socrates says, to be honest, if that's what I do, I will tell you, as long as you include the stingray in that example, that the stingray is perplexed, that would fit. Because I don't really know. I don't know. What is the definition of virtue? So that's a little bit of what happens in the story. And he basically says, but I do think there are things you know. And he even says, bring over one of your slaves, one of your children, your boy slaves that are in the house. He says, yeah, this one was born here. He speaks Greek, but he was born here. He only knows things here. And Socrates gets him to basically figure out a math problem that people would have thought he couldn't have figured out. I won't go into the details, but that's like a little segue that happens in the course of the conversation. So that's a little window into what happens in the conversation, in the dialogue. But the bottom line is that in this dialogue, Socrates is showing that real learning is often just recollection, helping someone rediscover truths that they already possess. And he can ask a question that draws out of that other person, even this slave boy who knows nothing, has never had an education. He can help them draw out that other person's their own reasoning rather than lecturing to them. And that's sort of insight number one is that there is a way to ask questions that leads to somebody coming to conclusions of truth. Sounds like coaching, right?
Oh, it truly does. Well, and you help people, like we've said, rediscover the truths,
Yeah.
rediscover the right way, and we've talked over the years, like, okay, so what's your heart telling you to do? What's
Yeah.
that voice in your head saying you should do next,
Right.
or what path you should choose? And I'd say 99% of the time, people know what should be
Yeah.
done, what is the right thing to do. Many times they're repelled from it because it's going to be difficult or uncomfortable or it's hard,
Yep.
but
Yep.
yeah, I know.
Right.
I know what I'm
Well,
supposed to do.
and that ought to be episode 301. We ought to talk about people who know what they ought to do and then feel what they ought to do. Sometimes those are not the same thing. I feel like doing something where, I got a little self-deception going on where, I'm going to take the easier path, but I know what I really need to do. We can talk about that another time, but yeah, I think you're spot on. Spot on.
Oh yeah. Well, and we hear that so many times from the people that we coach. They've either done it previously or they're applying something they've learned somewhere else to this new situation.
Totally.
Yeah. As a parent, I've learned this,
Yeah.
and lo and behold, in the workplace, ooh, yeah, that could be applied here as well.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. So the discussion sometimes surfaces ideas that they had in another situation, but now are applicable someplace else. So you're like, yes, that works.
And once that event is over and they've had some success, or even failure, to be honest with you, I'll often ask at the beginning of a coaching session, hey, you committed to XYZ last time. What progress did you make? And then they'll describe successes and failures in some cases. And then you can sort of say, okay, so what insight there is something you want to keep with you for the next thing that you are going to tackle? What's something you've learned about yourself or how the world operates or how you can be effective that you want to take and use in other areas and arenas of your life. So I think that's a huge insight. But that leads to the second thing that I notice from this Socratic dialogue that applies to us, which is, sometimes that truth that we know is buried a little bit and buried enough that we're in conflict with other people on difficult conversations. We've got a whole series that we've done on the book Crucial Conversations. You and I are big fans. And, sort of a little bit buried in here. And it's not Socrates' main point. He's not trying to get into a difficult conversation with somebody and win an argument and that sort of thing. But he is talking about we're not on the same page about what you know and what I know. We're trying to wrestle to the truth, if you will. And so he's really talking about how to speak the truth effectively. And so there's one part in the dialogue where he says this. He basically, Meno's, they're having this sort of little slight disagreement about what they mean by virtue. And he says, look, if we were friends, he says, if you're somebody I'm debating or having a big dialogue with and you were my friend, he says, I should not only speak the truth, but I should make use of premises which the person interrogated would be willing to admit. I'll try to translate that. The idea of I want you to be won over to the truth that I'm trying to share. And so let me think, what are some premises that you already admit to? What are some things that you acknowledge are true that we can use as building blocks toward the thing that we're at loggerheads over? And, the idea is, it's safe, it's mutually respectful, it's a foundation for any meaningful conversation that we would have is to say, what do you and I both agree is true right now? We both can conclude, can concede that this is a truth that we both agree on. Let's build from there. Any argument that we have, any logic I'm trying to walk you through has to be built on a foundation of something you accept as true.
Oh yeah.
I think we see that all the time too.
Yeah, yeah, think about it, and I didn't know this was, 2,500 years old. But how many times have you started a conversation with, all right, I think we can both agree
Yep.
that we want what's best for the kids, right? Or
Yep.
we can both agree we want what's best for the department. And by best, I mean, right, maybe we define that a little bit more.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, you start a conversation, and you want to make sure that your premise is aligned.
Yeah.
At that point, you may get disagreement. Well, no, I don't think that's the main reason we want to have this conversation, or I don't think that's the main thing that we're all working towards. All right, let's talk about that. And so we have that conversation. So until we agree on what it is that we're working towards, having a conversation just becomes a mess.
I have recent examples I can think of that obviously I won't share publicly because it's a client confidentiality issue. But you and I have both had clients who over the last year or so have realized I've got to go talk to so and so about their behavior. And one of the things they do is at the beginning of those conversations, once we've coached them up a little bit, is to say, hey, here are the things that are facts. These are observable things that I've noticed, that they've happened. Your sales are down. Or you come into work late, every day of the week. Things that are true that, both sides would agree with the premise, right? Now, the other side may say, oh, but it's for a totally valid reason that I'm late every day. Well, as long as we both agree you're late every day, we can at least start there with the conversation and say, okay, we know that's happening. I'm extrapolating some things are going on because of it. And I want to, work with you to address that. So yeah, speaking truth effectively by having something that we both agree is true being the start of our conversation is a big deal.
Oh yeah. Well, and we've often asked people, we're coaching somebody, they need to have a coaching conversation with somebody. And our question, all right, so what do you want for this person?
Yes.
And all of a sudden, all right, so I want them to stay. I want them to stay here as an employee. I want them to do better. I want them to hit their goals. I want them to be engaged and happy. It's like, okay, can you start with that premise when you have this conversation?
Right.
Why are we talking? Because I think we both want you to stay here. We both want you to do better. We both want you to do well and be happy.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Well, yeah, I want all those things. All right, so let's talk about, and now you're into it.
That's so well said. And the idea there, remember I said Socrates says, if you were a friend, if we were friends, this is how I would talk to you about it. Mm-hmm. And in that same paragraph, Socrates, I had to pull it up here to make sure, but he says, if you were a philosopher who was a little more antagonistic, what I'd say to you is, you have my answer, and if I am wrong, your business is to take up the argument and refute me. And think about how different that approach is, right? And we've heard that approach. You're lazy. You're lazy. Prove me wrong. Right? We've heard people say things like that. Mm-hmm. And this is saying, actually, you're my friend. Or in other words, I have actual care for you as an employee. And so let me start from a place where I want you to get persuaded by me. I want to win you over. This is for your good. If you really care about them, it's for their good. And so you start from a place that they agree with you on. Mm-hmm. And anyway, there's a third insight here. We've got to get to this because it's just so funny. But this whole this idea of the stingray, what Socrates would have called the torpedo fish. Meno is accusing Socrates of being like a torpedo fish that torpifies people. In other words, numbs them, numbs their mind, numbs their tongue. They just can't answer. They're shocked. And Socrates accepts the charge. But he adds this key twist that, well, if the torpedo is torpid as well as the cause of torpidity in others, then indeed I am a torpedo, for I perplex others, not because I'm clear, but because I am utterly perplexed myself. Now, that's a lot of words to basically say, I'm curious. I'm not saying I do know the answers. I'm really humble about this. I think there's probably more that I don't understand. Let's talk about it. And that is a huge stance. It's a huge posture, this posture of humility. The best questioning creates a shared perplexity, if you will. Both people are temporarily stunned because they are genuinely exploring what's true. And that starts with honest uncertainty. You wrestle with that to get to the truth. I think that's just a healthy mindset to adopt when you're having a hard conversation or even just a strenuous conversation with somebody that, I bet there's a lot here I don't know.
Well, think how much different your conversation and your questions will be if you go into it thinking you already know the answer.
Yep.
Yeah, if you go into it thinking, all right, I know what's going on with this guy, and I'm going to ask some questions that get to them admitting what I think, is the problem.
Yep.
Versus, and we have this happens all the time. We had it happen in a whole large group setting where people were speculating on what the problem was with this team member.
Yep.
Well, I think they're lazy. I think, it's like, but do you know?
Right.
Well, no, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, no, pretty sure is not gonna cut it. Right?
That's right.
And I've heard the term guessathon. Right. We'll just sit around and have a guessathon about what we think is the cause or what's driving behaviors or why this is, It's like, well, what if we literally went into the conversation curious and with no preconceived idea of what was happening, and that we would be surprised by what we discovered and what we found out.
And just one other thing I want to say about that. I so agree with that, and I know I violated it as well. Like I know, I know how poorly I do at that, and all it takes, your spouse, your boss, that one troublesome coworker who is just personality-wise so different from you. There's all sorts of places where we just automatically make a judgment. He's clueless. He's lazy. Whatever it is, but to turn this around, all I have to do is think about what it feels like when somebody just makes an assumption about how I'm feeling about something or why I'm doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, I know this about myself, nothing makes me more angry than when somebody just sort of dismisses getting to know me and assumes they've got it figured out. That drives me insane. And so if you feel at all treated unfairly by that, you would never want to go into a conversation without asking questions. And by the way, that's why we brought up crucial conversations. It really builds on Socrates. And we'll include a link to our, we have a whole web page on the hipsocket.net website about this, talking about, a whole series of videos, a handout, all sorts of things that are goodies from the book Crucial Conversations. But, it's really taking this Socratic approach into the modern practice, and it's really in two really practical ways. The book uses the state method. State starts with share your facts, right? Premises both sides can agree on are facts. And also part of state is the T. One of the T's is talk tentatively, and the E is encourage testing. So it's recognizing torpification, right? It's recognizing that we need to stay humble, invite pushback, encourage conversations that move people from defensiveness to really owning their part of the conversation. Which is why we would say things like, I'm sure there's more to the story. I'd love to hear your side, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's an example of how to handle that well and to handle it Socratically. But anyway, so that's why we reference specifically crucial conversations as well as just the coach approach in general.
Oh yeah.
Real insights there.
Yeah, I've got a general manager I work with, and he's fond of saying, uh, we could come up with 100 reasons of what we think is going on, and I guarantee it's none of those.
That's a smart guy. That's a wise guy.
Yeah, I think it's just pure experience. Over the years,
Yeah.
we've learned that, yeah, we'll do a couple of guess-a-thons, and then we'll go ask with genuine curiosity, and then we'll come back and go, all right, it wasn't any of the things we thought.
Yeah.
Just like we're kind of disappointed in ourselves. We thought we were pretty good at figuring things out, but an example they had. Something was going on. There was rumbles in the whole organization. People were working on their resumes, thinking they needed to go find other places to work, and so we had a guess-a-thon. All right, what could be going on here? Maybe they're being headhunted. Maybe couldn't figure it out. And finally, he's like, just go talk to him. I said, all right. So I went and talked to a number of the team members. I said, hey, we've noticed some things, and we both would agree this is a great place to work, but we've noticed a lot of tension, people talking about leaving. What do you think's going on? And here was the scenario. In this particular store, there was an employee water fountain, and the water fountain had quit working. It was broken. Multiple employees had told the ownership and the general manager about the water fountain, and nothing had been done.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Yeah, based upon that fact, the supposition was the owner is selling the dealership.
Yep.
And that's why he's not reinvesting in the equipment.
Yep. He's done with this place.
Yeah, we must all find alternate jobs. Like, what? What? Like, what? Yeah, so, and I heard the story, somehow it permeated the organization. So I went back to the general manager. I said, all right, here's what's going on. And he
Good
said,
news.
like, if we'd have came up with 100 reasons, broken water fountain would not have been maybe in the top 200. So until you go ask, you do not know. And so approaching it with that honest uncertainty, that honest, I really don't know what's going on here. And you can be honest because you don't.
Yeah, right.
You really don't. If you stop and think about it, you don't know.
Well, you and I work, at least, I don't know, 70, 80% of the time in car dealerships. We have other clients, but we think of so many dealership examples. And employee surveys would be another example. You do an employee survey, there's a low score, there are comments, and that manager goes, I know what they're talking about. I know who said that. And you don't. Let me just tell you, manager, if you're listening to this and you're one of those people and you're like, yeah, I normally do. You don't. I promise you don't. There is usually more to the story that you do not know. And if you'll go ask, you will be shocked to find out that it wasn't your low performers and complainers who were making the comment. It was one of your high performers, somebody that you did want to listen to. That happens time and time again. So that's another example. But let's roll through some other practical applications of this Socratic idea. For instance, and you sort of reference this in one-on-ones. Start with that shared premise. We both want an increase in sales. We both want CSI to be higher. We both want less headaches. I get paid more when you get paid more. So I know we both want you to make more money. Just starting with something that we both agree on before exploring what's getting in the way of that increase in CSI or pay or sales. So that's one practical application.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the thing I hear when people skip that step is the assumption.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both know why we're here. Do we?
Right.
Do we both know why we're here? Right. So by stating this up front, you may find out right then and there may be more
Yeah.
to what's going on. Yeah,
And,
I
and
want those things and something else.
yeah, yeah. And that works on the flip side too. Like I want to have a regular coaching session with my direct reports. And they may be assuming, uh-oh, this is where I'm going to get spanked, or this is where they're going to tell me I've got this new expectation on me, or this, they're unhappy with me somehow. And no. So state up front, like this is a regular coaching session. This is for me to figure out what you need to perform at a higher level. This is for you, not for me. And guess what? Because Socrates is right and Dr. Samuel Johnson is right that people need to be reminded more than instructed. Guess what? You're going to need to repeat that that's why you're doing this the next time you have a coaching session until this becomes habit. So another example, when you're giving feedback, right? Negative feedback, maybe about to have that crucial conversation, admit that you are torpified, perplexed, that you have some uncertainty. I'm seeing these three behaviors. It's making me think there's something going on, but you know what? There's probably a lot that I am missing. What do you see? I'm sure I'm not seeing the whole picture. What do you see? Reduces resistance, sparks better ideas just by you saying, you know what? I'm not sure, and gives them a chance to open up.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like we talked about, if you're honest, you really don't know.
Yep.
And so yeah, you have some ideas, some thoughts, some speculations, but you don't know. So why not ask?
And if it is a training session, right, you can still use this coach approach because you are looking for them to get to the moment where they don't know, right? As a coach, I'm looking for my client to say, I don't know. I don't know what to do here. I don't know what's going on here. Well, wonderful. That is why we're coaching, right? If you knew all those answers, you wouldn't need me. So you're looking for that moment when they admit that. And frankly, for you too, right? You're looking for the moment where you admit it. And that means, okay, here's some things I need to go figure out in the coaching session, in that hard conversation. When you admit that you don't know, you are now officially ready to be open and to learn. That's a good place to be for training and for coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Last one, this works in daily huddles, right? In surfacing bright spots. So, the idea here being, what are some things we both agree on that are working, right? things that are going well. And if you've never had the pleasure, a lot of folks find this a very awkward exercise in the beginning. Like, why are we just going to brag on ourselves? Why are we just going to talk about things that are working? We need to problem solve. But if they can get turned around to, you're like, yeah, we all agree that thing is working. That's going really well. That person's a great performer. That process is really nailing it. That number is higher than all the other numbers. These are all good things. It's amazing what that does to kind of the brain chemistry of the collective consciousness. Everybody is suddenly sort of excited about making more improvements and figuring out how to make the bright spots even brighter. So those are all just practical examples of how you could apply this in your workplace.
Oh, yeah. Well, and sometimes in surfacing the bright spots, you may uncover sticking points.
Yes.
You're like, man, you guys had a record month. We did, and we're very excited about that. But that also exposed the fact that we're deficient in this process because the increased volume caused us to get backlogged over here. Okay, all right, we can talk about that. So yeah, we want to celebrate the bright spots, and sometimes that leads us to the conversation of, okay, what could we be doing more, better, different, or less to improve things?
Let me turn up the heat just a little bit more before we close and just talk about younger team members, younger generations that are entering the workforce. They are going to push back on top-down instruction. You don't ask the question why, they're going to ask the question why. Why would we do this? Why is this important? Why would I bother adding this step to the process? It seems like it's going to take more time. And so The good news is that if you sort of combine a Socratic coach approach, um, you know, um, having a little humility about, where you're at and don't know where they're at, um, they get more engaged in the conversation, right? They're probably more accountable as well, without turning it into a battle. Because instead of this being a battle where you're getting force fed, it's a discussion. It's a joint discussion where we're being authentic with each other, trying to figure out how to help you advance. I do know some things, and when you're willing to say, I don't know, I'd like help with that, boss, I got plenty to teach you on. But this is a way to approach Gen Z, Gen Y that is going to be it's going to allow them to have the walls down more often and hear from you and learn.
Oh yeah.
So,
Well, I think the boomer generation, the Gen X generation had the same thoughts.
yes,
They just didn't say
they
it.
didn't say it. Yep.
Yeah, they just like, yeah, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
Yep. That's why Gen X was called the slacker generation, right? Like, whatever. I guess I'll just go do that thing you told me to do.
Yeah, that's what you want. Even though they know, because they do it every single day, there's a better way to do it.
That's right.
But
That's right.
nobody asked.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I'm not saying Socrates was a business coach or a life coach. He was a philosopher. He was a lover of wisdom. He was asking a lot of leading questions to try to get you to the truth. Once you said, I don't know, he had a lot of ways to get you to what he, I think, had figured out as true. Some people might disagree with what I just said, but I don't think he's a coach. But he's got a huge amount of a gold mine for those of us who use the coach approach, because he did a lot of things that really do work because he understood human nature in that way. So, we would really just challenge you, the next time you need to address a performance, a process, pause and ask, right? Am I reminding them of what they already know? Am I starting from premises we both accept? And am I willing to be a little bit of, admitting that I really don't know the answer myself and talk tentatively, trying to uncover what's going on. So try it in your next coaching conversation. Watch the difference in energy and follow through that results from that. And by all means, let us know what happens when you do this, because we've seen it work time and again. We know it's a payoff, right? A very old payoff, as it turns out. It's happened before, thousands of years before.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Wise words from the past, applicable to the present. And you think of Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and you have to throw in Mr. Wolf, our announcer. Yeah, take it away, Mr. Wolf.
Not a moron. Not at all.
Nope.
So go ahead and tweet that. Or share it any other way you want. As always, there are no rights reserved, no trademarks, no copyrights. Share it if you want to. And join us next time on It Doesn't Take a Genius.
That's good enough. Gave me a new button there. Okay.
Is this going to be part of the blooper reel?
Well, at this point, yeah.